All right, so it's wonderful to be here for the second year in a row. This year we've got these really cool snazzy sweatshirts, which is nice. And if I could see you because of the light, I'm sure there's some beautiful new faces in the crowd. However, this is an OSINT conference, so nobody's really new here because we've all looked each other up already right on LinkedIn and your secondary Reddit accounts. So it's good to see all of you. And Matt has said that this is kind of a pick your own adventure type of conference, right? Unfortunately, I'm the final speaker and there's no competing session. So you're at my mercy, whether we come out of the temple with the golden chalice or if we all die at the bottom of a scorpion pit impaled on a spike in a pyramid somewhere. So I was never good with those R.L. Stine Goosebump books when I was a kid with those choose your own adventure things. And I've made some questionable life choices. So good luck to all of us. All right, so creating social networks graphs using Gephi. I'm not sure if it's Gephi or Gephi. My name is Stephen with a PH. So Gephi with a PH might also be Gephi. I've been called Stefan for a lot of portion of my life. I say Stephen with a PH, and they're like, okay, PHTVN. Like, okay, whatever. So let's go. Social network analysis. What is it? Process of investigating social structures by using networks and graphs. So a lot of us will do this kind of automatically in our brains, right? If I was to kind of ask you to piece together, maybe who do you work with? And do you play basketball with some people? And do you go to church or synagogue or other forms of worship with somebody? You can probably make a mental model of who kind of lives in what circle, what orbit, and then understand maybe if there's somebody that goes to all three of those locations with you, or maybe two out of the three. It might be the church and basketball, it might be basketball and work. So we all build up these mental models already. Right, maybe it was Mrs. Smith in grade 3 English who decided that there was a problem student in the class and sent him to extra behavioral psychologist sessions, not speaking from personal experience. So she kind of identified the issues in the class and identified the student that needed the remedial help. So that is essentially what we're going to be going through today, how to build network graphs. Incredible workshop that was before this by Stephen Harris. I see incredible ways to use what he did and apply some of the results to Gephi as well. So here are two examples of different social networks. The one that's a little bit more complex with the two real groups. This could be maybe a terrorist network in different countries, right? So then they would want to share resources like money, ideology, weapons. And on the other side, we've got maybe a network of drug dealers. And we've got about 11 or 12 drug dealers. And we might want to focus in on breaking that network. So I work a lot as my role is customer success with Penlink. We have an open source platform. And I work a lot with local and state level law enforcement. And maybe some of you here are law enforcement and you never have enough caffeine and you never have enough resources. So what you want to do is you want to focus the little resources that you have to make the most bang for your buck. So in our case, we would want to really maybe take out the circle person on the left side, because that would really bifurcate both networks from the different countries. They wouldn't be able to share information, weapons, ideology. And on the other side, you might want to take out those 4 drug dealers, because then the other 7 would not have access to drugs. So instead of taking out all 11 or 12, you could focus on 4 and break the entire network. So credible applications of social network analysis. This is an excerpt from the prologue, I think that's the word, prologue, the beginning of Michael Lewis's most recent book about the pandemic. And if you want, you can read it. But he tells the story of a little girl called Laura Glass, and she was creating a science fair project for her 8th grade science fair. And her father was Bob Glass, who was, probably was, a prominent scientist in the American military. And essentially what she came up with was a pandemic model. And she realized that pandemics are spread by people, and people have social networks. And you can read there on the right side, essentially, if you gave somebody a vaccine, or if you took a specific person out of a social network, they weren't able to propagate the spread of the pandemic. So maybe had Sans spoken with the American government back in 2020, we would have been in person in 2021, 2022, and 2023. So a lot of applications for social network analytics. This is what we'll be going through today, these 4 steps. And we'll start with acquiring and cleaning data. There's no shortage of resources out there to learn Gephi. There's plenty of wikis and YouTube tutorials and forums and subreddits. However, the big issue that I had when I was trying to learn Gephi was a lot of the resources expect you to have a file, to have data. Or they'll supply you with a file, then say, upload this file to Gephi, and now let's start learning Gephi. But the real issue for me was, okay, but I've got like data that I don't know how to upload to Gephi. I don't have a model. I don't have a Excel file that works for me. So that's what we're going to be going through today. The hard part will be acquiring and cleaning data. There's a lot of slides, but everything will be on YouTube afterwards, so don't worry. You don't have to take notes or pictures or anything. It'll all be up in a couple of weeks. I don't know coding. I'm literally a tomato farmer by training. So this will have no coding. There was a workshop this morning. Talked about Jupiter. I don't know why he was talking about planets, but okay, so, sorry? Okay, yeah, whatever. So this is going to be for like law enforcement. You don't necessarily have the capabilities of coding. It's all Excel, all open source, all free. So let's go into it. We're going to be looking at a couple of teams from the NHL as our model. I'm originally from Montreal. Canadians, the team that starts every season with hope and ends in therapy. Yeah, the last time they won the Stanley Cup, the captain was not even the sound of a beer bottle opening. So I really wish they would spend more time on their on-ice performance as opposed to their social media. But now I just sound like my mom. So we'll be looking at some NHL teams and modeling the network between them. Take a look here. It says there's 122 people that Montreal is following. We'll get back to that number afterwards. But in terms of my case, I'm interested to see who Montreal is following, not who's following them. Different use cases will be different. However, for this case, Montreal is actively following other teams, right? So they have passive followers, but active following. So that is who Montreal is interested in. If you're looking at influence campaigns, who's following Montreal might be a little bit more interesting. But each case will have its own different reasons. So what we do is we can go into the following. The first thing we need to do is to scrape the list of following. Now, I don't like using third-party, automatic scrapers and things like that. One, I find that it burns undercover accounts pretty quickly. And two, like OPSEC, I don't want to give third-party any more access. I don't know who's making these little applications. So I'd rather just kind of do the data on my own, especially for law enforcement. You have to go to court afterwards and say you did something. You know exactly what you did and how it was done. A lot easier to explain to a jury. So one of the issues with, you can see here that there's 5 teams up on the screen, and Montreal was following 122. So by looking at the bar there in the arrow, clearly it's not all 122. So we have to load the rest. Also, I forgot to mention at the beginning, there are slide numbers. If you have a question, just look at the slide number if you want. That's the one thing I learned in my MBA. So we need to load the additional teams that Montreal's following. So we just scroll down. You'll see this little wheel of hope, just like the team gives me hope sometimes. And then you get to the middle, right? You have to go. You're in the middle. You keep going down. Eventually, you'll get to the bottom, and you've loaded all the data. Then you can just easily use your mouse. You can start at the top or the bottom, scroll, just kind of drag down or drag up. Or if you'd like, once you've loaded all the information, you can just use Control-Shift up, Control-Shift down, and it'll copy all the information. A little bit of a caveat. If you want to just do this kind of once, you can start with your mouse and drag down. It'll load the next ones automatically. If you start at the top with Control-Shift down to copy all the information, it won't load. So hopefully that's clear. Kind of doing it with the keyboard shortcut will not load all the extra information. And even a little OSINT tip here, if you haven't loaded the entire list, you can still search the entire list. So if you're looking for a specific person within a following list or followers, you can just put it in. Even if you haven't loaded, you can pull them up. So then we paste into Excel and we start cleaning the data. We've got our data, we've acquired it, now we're going to clean it. So this is what it looks like when you throw it into Excel, and we'll go through a couple of steps to clean the data. The first one is getting rid of the pictures. So one of my favorite tips of Excel is you just kind of select the column with all the data, and then you press F5. What this will allow you to do is select certain elements on your page. So we go there to Special, and you have a list of things that you can select that are special. And we're going to select the objects. So if you can see it here, it says objects there are selected. And once you press that, all of the images are selected. Then we just press delete, and all the images are gone. Step 1 to cleaning our data. Then what we're going to do is we need to get rid of the hyperlinks. So when you copy the data, right, it's got like the name and the username. So the name is a hyperlink. So when you look at the data here, we need to get rid of it, but it's annoying because they're all different from each other. So we have to delete each one individually. There's nothing that's really common to them, except for the fact that they're hyperlinks. And we can get rid of hyperlinks in Excel as well. So you select the data, and you go to Control F, make sure you're on the Replace tab, and then you go to the Advanced Options. From there, in green, you can see that it says Format. When you click on that, you'll get a little hand selector tool or some sort, and you can just click on one of these cells that is a hyperlink. And then if you look here, right, so it says choose formatting from cell, sorry, then you'll get the hand picker. And then if you click on one of the cells, you will see it says it changed to preview here, right? So here it said no format set and no format set, and then it switched to preview. And then when you replace all, it'll replace all of the cells that were hyperlinks with nothing. So we've got rid of the hyperlinks. Then we need to get rid of the word follow. Pretty simple, right? Control F, replace all the follows with nothing, and there we go. And now another one of my favorite tricks is getting rid of the blank cell. So I used to do this manually. And we do the same thing. So select the data, Control F, go to Special. And this time we'll go to blanks, not the objects. They'll all be selected. Right-click, delete. And then we will shift the cells up. And we have gone from our data to the data that we're going to need to use in Gephi. So far, so good? Awesome. And then I did it for 3 different teams. So Montreal, Seattle, just they randomly came up, and Boston as well. So Montreal is a long-standing rivalry with Boston. I have some friends from Montreal that went to a game in Boston. They were wearing their Montreal jerseys, and they got peed on in the stands. So if there's anybody from Boston here, bravo, or you want to explain yourselves afterwards, I'd love to hear the meaning of that. But you can combine it into one sheet, and we're going to use this sheet a little bit afterwards. I referenced the page here, but just remember that we've got this one sheet with all the different 3 teams that we've extracted the following. Theoretically, we could have done this all at the same time. We could have taken the 3 following lists, put them onto one tab, and then cleaned the data at once. But for the sake of simplicity, I just wanted to show you kind of doing it one team at a time, just to make it a little bit cleaner. A little bit of a quirk. So if you're going to be, testifying or something, you're like, are you sure you collected all the information? Instagram is saying that Seattle's following 100 people. When I did this, I saw 86. I didn't count all 86, although I think I did for one of the teams. But essentially, Meta lies. Shocking, right? So I found this also for Facebook. So on the left, you can see that this person has 38 friends. If you look on the bottom there in the red, you don't have to count all 38, but clearly it's either 37, 39, or 35. There's a pair missing. So they show us incorrect data all the time. Just keep that in mind when you're looking at your data. TikTok did this. Okay, you can see 7 followers. There's only 4. This could be for a couple of reasons. Won't get into that now, but just keep in mind when you're kind of taking away your data. A couple of small issues we still need to do with our Excel. So you can see here that there's a lot of question marks for this woman, Emma. I don't know who she is. I don't know why Montreal's following her. But again, they should focus more on the hockey. You can see here that her name is right-shifted. So there's a lot of, probably when she was creating her user, there are a lot of space marks that she put in. So we need to take care of that. This guy over here, Jake Evans, is got the same username and name, which is fine, theoretically. But you might want to just change that to a little bit of a different format. Here we've got somebody, David. So if you've got David on Montreal and a David on Boston, and they're different last names, it'll make an incorrect connection that they're both following the same David. Just keep in mind you might want to change that as well. And here we've got somebody without a name who's got a username but no name. So either put something in or you can leave it blank. But just keep in mind that there are some issues in your data you have to clean up. So we want to get rid of those question marks. And there's a little bit of an issue in Excel because a question mark in Excel is a wildcard. So if you do the Control F, replace all the question marks with nothing, it's not going to work. So just put a little tilde, that's a squiggly line next to the 1 on your keyboard that you've probably never touched before. And then so tilde, question mark, and replace, it'll overwrite Excel's wildcard knowledge. So there we go. We are almost there. Good thing in Excel is to just trim out empty spaces. Not going to show this, but you can see in the large list there on the left that there's a little bit of a space before Emma. So just use a trim function and get rid of any unwanted spaces. And also we have an empty row. Well, what's going on, right? Didn't we get rid of the empty rows before? Control F, select the objects, right? Well, because we had this guy and we replaced all the question marks with spaces. So just do the same thing again, F5, blanks, delete the blank spaces, and we are essentially good to go, I believe, from here. Any questions on acquiring the data, cleaning the data? Awesome. So now we're going to create our file for Gephi. Pretty straightforward. Create a new sheet with 3 columns, source, target, and type. Paste in the list of who one of the teams is following. And then in column A, so this is who Montreal is following. And in C, just put in directed for all of them. So you can see there that Montreal is following 110 teams. So even though they were on Instagram, it said 122. In the end, we can see that they're actually following 110 teams. And then, pretty straightforward, just paste in the next set. So I did Seattle next, who Seattle was following, and then who Boston was following. Also, I'm using the convention MTL for Montreal as the source. So Boston is following Montreal, but it's not using the same convention. So either change the Canadien de Montréal to MTL or change MTL to Canadien de Montréal. And then you'll be able to, again, make those connections like we had with David before. OK, so here it's just like for Montreal's following Boston, so I changed it to BOS, so it would be the same. And then you save the sheet as a CSV. So if you've got a large Excel, you can select a sheet. So the sheet that you're actually working on is called your active sheet. So if you go to File and Save As, and save as CSV, it'll save only the active sheet. So that is what we need for Gephi. And then we're pretty much on our way. In terms of other platforms, so this is TikTok. If it's an open list, this process is straightforward, so I'm not going to go through it. Just scrape the data, paste it into Excel, and it's going to look the exact same. So we've already learned how to clean the data. If it's a Facebook profile, it's the exact same. You kind of scrape the data, just scroll down. And it looks the exact same way in Excel as well in order to clean. And that is pretty good. So now we can ChatGPT, right? You're not using it. You should be. Matt, yesterday, there was one of the sessions went a little bit short, so he jumped in and showed how he's using ChatGPT in an incredible way. Hopefully that'll go online. But if you're not using it, why not? This I would recommend only if you're doing this for your personal use. If you're going to show this in court, do not do it. Use Gephi because it's a little bit more of a legitimate software, right? There was a case where some lawyer sent some documents into the court, and like ChatGPT just made up a case. So be a little bit wary. So we have our list of the 3 following, and all we need to do is just throw this into ChatGPT. Now, I did have to buy a premium version of ChatGPT for $20. I'm not sure if this was too intensive for it, if I had already done too much that month with ChatGPT. So you might have to pay a couple of dollars. But essentially, can you please create a social network visualization of this data? And yeah, it did. So there we go. What's also really cool is that it gave the graph a name. Something else, I guess, I learned during my MBA. Does anybody else talk to ChatGPT nicer than they talk to their coworkers? Like, please do this, and can you maybe, yeah? Right, OK. So Then you can ask it to like do some changes. Can you please focus on nodes right here? You can look at this after on YouTube. You can enhance it. You can say, okay, only show me teams that are connected to all 3 of my original people of interest. You can already see there the NHL is connected to Montreal, Boston, and Seattle. Can you, okay, then it gives a legend as well, which is pretty cool. All on its own, didn't ask for the legend, created on its own, so that was pretty amazing. You can see that there's the nodes in the middle are kind of like layered over each other. You're not really seeing Montreal as one of the nodes, so you can say, can you please space out the overlapping nodes a little bit, and it does that. Again, here to there, they're a little bit more spaced out, so you can do some cool things in Gephi, ask it for different layouts. In ChatGPT, ask it for different layouts, and pretty simple to use ChatGPT. But let's go to Gephi or Gephi. All right, so a little bit about social network graphs. There are 2 main types, undirected and directed. So your undirected will be, let's say, like Facebook, because for me to be friends with Matt on Facebook, he needs to be friends with me. It's a 2-way direction. Doesn't maybe necessarily translate to real life, although I consider him a friend, but it will be good for Facebook. This would also be like for a road network in which all the roads are 2-way streets. So you don't need to have the arrows because by definition, they're 2 ways, or this could be like family members. You don't need to show the direction because they're all family members. And you have here the nodes, so that would be like the individuals within the family, and the edges could be aunt or uncle or whatever it is, kind of like attribute of the data. And then you have directed, which would be more like following. Twitter following, right? I can follow somebody else, they don't follow me back. Instagram, TikTok, other things like that. So we're going to look at creating a directed graph in Gephi. Another thing about social network graphs is that sometimes if you're looking at an individual, the individual doesn't need to be on the graph. And to explain to you why, let's say we've got a graph made of 11 people here. So if you have the original person of interest, right, in this case, he would be on the graph, you'd have another 11 lines. So it just kind of makes it a little bit more noisy. You don't need to have the person of interest on the graph. If you wanted to see what my graph of me in high school looked like, there it is. So yeah, a lot of therapy. Okay, right, not just Montreal. So you download Gephi, it's free. We love free stuff. Download it. So the website has a lot of wikis and forums and everything if you want to learn more. And you just go to download, and you open it up, and it'll say new project. So in there, in red, new project, you can click on that. And then you're going to want to import the spreadsheet that we just created. So either it'll be from the red box where it says import spreadsheet, or if you don't see it for some reason, you can go up to where it says in green data laboratory, and then it'll have import spreadsheet. Sorry. You go to the data laboratory tab, and it should say import spreadsheet. If you don't see the import spreadsheet on the data laboratory tab in green, go to file and then import the spreadsheet. And then you upload your file from wherever you saved it on your computer. You go to next. You go to finish. Make sure that the graph is directed. So it's not in any box over here, but it's a little bit there on the left, graph type directed, new workspace, and then click OK. What's nice is that Gephi has automatically created both a nodes and an edge table. So the nodes is the individual list of all the teams that we have, and the edges is the relationships between them. What we're looking at here is a pretty simple type of graph, but if you wanted to, you can make really incredible graphs in Gephi. Down here is a link to creating a map where if you have lat and longs for your nodes, you can kind of layer them onto a map. Pretty cool, but we're not going to get into it today. But you would insert kind of those attributes into the box in green. And there we go. So now we're going over to the overview tab in red. You can already see that there's some type of social network graph that's been created. And from here on in, it's just making it pretty. You can already probably see 3 different clusters of Montreal, Boston, and Seattle. So what you would want to do now is you go there in red where it says layout, and you'll want to choose, I like the Force Atlas or the Force Atlas 2. There's a couple of different algorithms. Different professors like having different names after themselves. So to publish, they need to have like some algorithm that's a little bit different than other people. So you click the algorithm that you want, and then you click run. And then after it runs for a couple of seconds, for most cases with a couple of hundred nodes, it'll take a couple of seconds, and then you just click stop. Okay? And then there we go. So we've got our, you can already see in the graph something that looks a little bit nicer, and you already start making sense of what it is. If you want some information on exactly what the algorithm does, there's some literature. I have no idea what it says. There's a lot of numbers and symbols that I don't know coding. All right, so a little bit about Gephi. To zoom, you can use your wheel mouse, so just zoom in, zoom out of the graph. To go left and right, it's a little bit counterintuitive. Instead of clicking with your left clicky thing on your mouse, button, that's the word, it's been a long day for everybody, you have to use your right clicky thing on your mouse, and then you can move left and right. Also, if you're wondering, there is no undo button in Gephi. So if you do a change, you can't just undo it, you have to literally go back and kind of reverse what you did. Anybody get the reference? No? Dude, where's my car? No, okay, right. Okay, so understanding the graph. So you can click on a node or hover over a node, and you can see that this is probably a team that's connected to Montreal, Boston, and Seattle. Okay, this is probably a team here, or a cluster of teams that are related to 2 of the 3 original profiles of interest. And this is a team over here, a cluster of teams that's only related to 1 of my original profiles of interest. And we're just going to go through how to clean this up a little bit. So on the right side there, in the green box, it says filters. Or if you'd like, from the red box where it says window, you can click on filters as well. That'll open up some filters there, as you can see. And just go to topology and degree range. And you're just going to take that degree range. And it says there, drag filter here. Nice that it tells us how to do it. So you just drag degree range down to the bottom. And then we get this little slidey thing. So it's a pretty cool interactive. And if you notice, it goes from 1 to 110. 1 being a team that's being followed only by Montreal or only by Boston or only Seattle. 110, if you remember, Montreal was following 110 teams. So that would be like Montreal is like the upper edge of the limit. So you can actually change this. It's a little bit finicky. You have to use your mouse very, very slightly. But if you go up to 2, take a look what happens to the graph now. Those arrows in green, which are only connected to 1 of the original profiles of interest, boom, they're gone. If we go up to 3, even better. So we can see now that there's a team that is only 1 team that's connected to all 3 of our original profiles of interest. And there we go. So now there's directions on there are arrows on the graph because it's a directed graph. And it's a little bit hard to see, but now we're going to show you how to make those arrows a little bit stronger. Okay, so we can just get rid of the filters by clicking on the button again. It kind of de-expands it, dis-expands it. English is kind of my first language, but bear with me. So now we want to add in some labels. To do that, there in the bottom, there's a little button that brings up information. So we have here, now it says global, edges, and label. We're going to go to the labels, and we're going to select nodes. So there's a little arrow there that selects nodes. Put it on, nothing happened. That's fine. Sometimes Gephi gets a little bit confused because it created the nodes and the edges on its own from 1 sheet. So we have to help it a little bit. So we go to configure there, and you just play around with it. Either uncheck ID and check labels, uncheck labels, check ID, and then boom, we've got our labels. Great. Up there in red, if you want, you can change the appearance of the labels. So there's a color palette, there's a size. You can probably tell intuitively what the icons are. So by default, they're kind of gray or black. You could change the ranking. So here in degree, which will be apparent in a couple of seconds. If you want, you can change the color. Default's green. You could change it to any color palette that you'd like. Just click apply. That'll force it to run. And now here, the in degree of the NHL is the strongest because all 3 teams are pointing at it. Seattle's a little bit less strong because maybe Boston and Montreal are pointing at it, as we'll see soon. So a couple of things you can do to make your graph nice. We can go to the edges. And if you just use that little slider there, it'll make the lines connecting the different nodes a lot stronger. So you can already see here that this looks a lot better than what we had before. The arrows are a lot more apparent. You can change the font. You can do a couple of different things here. What else do we have? You can make it fixed, right? So you can play around with it, kind of see what works for you on your own. You can spend an entire week probably learning all these different ways of cleaning up the graph. And the graph is interactive, so you can take the nodes and drag them around and position them the way you like. Here it doesn't look like I did that so much because there's only like 4 teams, so it kind of looks like I just put the graph on its side, but I did rearrange it a little bit. So you can pull out the teams and make it a little bit nicer. What do we have here? If you go to the edges, you can have select colors. So this way, if I'm hovering over a specific node, so now the in are in blue and the out is in red. So as you saw before with the ranking when it was in degree, so Seattle was a little bit strong. That's because 2 teams are pointing at it as opposed to like maybe no teams pointing it to Boston or Montreal, or fewer teams pointing to Boston and Montreal. That's a little bit of a nice tool that you can use to explore the data. Maybe not as apparent here, but when you're looking at 8, 9, 10, 11 different profiles of interest, it'll certainly be interesting to see the relationships between them. What's nice also is that the graph manipulations affect the data table. So if you were to go from the overview tab back to the data laboratory, you would see that it's filtered. So on the graph on the left, it looks like there's 6 lines, but really there's 7 because Boston and Montreal are both pointing to each other. So if you look at the top panel here on the right, there are 7 lines relating to each of the different connections. And the nodes tab as well also has been similarly filtered. What's nice here is that you can add in data manually. So if you forgot something or you want to do a little bit of an edit, you can edit it here in Gephi itself. I wouldn't recommend building the data in Gephi because then you'd have to like input, 230 teams on its own. But you could certainly do some fine tuning in Gephi without having to upload it again. Then afterwards, you can go to the preview tab. This is where you make small final adjustments before you export it as a PDF or a SVG or a PNG. So I'm on the preview tab here in red. There in the blue, you can go to show labels, turn that on. Now we've got our labels. If you look in the red box, the arrows are very close to Seattle. So there in the green, if you'd like, you could change the radius. And then those red arrows will be a little bit further spaced out. So here you can make some fine tunings. And then you can export this to SVG if you want to upload it to Photoshop or PDF or PNG, however you'd like. So that essentially we've made our graphs. Now, it's a couple of additional applications. So we're looking at social media data here, but you can do this for essentially any type of data. So we had Stephen Harris's presentation before. You could take a look at all the different domain names, and maybe they're all pointing at one central one. So that's what I love about social network graphs is that there's so many different applications. One of them is for Bitcoin. So this is an article about how there was this horrible website called Welcome to Video with child pornography. And you would register for the website. You would be given a unique Bitcoin address to deposit Bitcoin in. And then the owner of the website took all the Bitcoin from the individual addresses and transferred them over to one central Bitcoin address. So essentially what, this was the IRS in this case. I guess the IRS does do good. Then they were able to understand the exchange to which that Bitcoin address was related to. There's a book called Tracers in the Dark by Andy Greenberg. I don't get royalties, an incredible book. Highly recommend reading. But that goes through how they were able to tell which exchange to subpoena for that address. And so they just did it by literally building up the social graph of the different addresses that were giving money to this exchange. So if you wanted to, you go to walletexplorer.com, put in an address there. It says up there in the top, your right. Download a CSV. You get a CSV. You have to manipulate it a little bit, but based on this talk, you'll understand how. And then you can upload it to Gephi and build up a Bitcoin social network. You could also do it for called detail records if you're law enforcement and you want to see who's calling who was sending text messages to who. You can clearly do that. A couple of additional resources. There's somebody called Martin Grandjean. He's got a couple of great YouTube videos. And there's this Veronica Espinoza. She's pretty prolific on LinkedIn. She's got a couple of Medium posts about how to use lots of different graphing tools, not just Gephi. So I recommend following them. And that is pretty much it. Thank you very much. Hopefully, maybe we'll see you next year. If not, thank you very much for this wonderful conference, Sense.